Hey everybody, it's Dave@drachtio.org. In this Getting Started video for Drachtio, I'm going to show you how to build a simple app using NPX and the create-drachtio-app. This video is for you if you're just getting started with Drachtio, but it's also for you if maybe you've been fooling around with it and you're wondering, is there a better way to structure my code? How does Dave build his apps and so forth? And it's also for you if maybe you've built an invite app and now you need to build a registrar and you're wondering, are there any good design patterns or code that I can jump on to use? You'll see all of that in this video. So let's get started. I'm going to quickly show you how to build an app, and then for those who care to stick around a little longer, I'll walk through some of the code and talk about how it's structured and why. All right? All right, to start with, we just type npx create-drachtio-app. And if I do it with no parameters like that, it will tell me what parameters are available. And you can see I have some options. I can generate an application with the test suite, which I recommend. I can use the Drachtio FS-MRF package for media. And then I can specify the request types that my app wants to handle. So like if I wanted to handle invites and registers, I would do that. If I wanted to handle all methods, I could just do all. In our case, let's handle invites and registers. Let's generate a test suite. And I'm just going to call it starter app. And that's it. It goes off, it generates an app, change into that directory. Right off the bat, we can run npm test. Let's try to run our test suite. You can see that we have a test for invites and a test for registers because those are the two method types that we wanted to handle. Now let's look at the code a little bit. We look at the package.json. You can see the various dependencies that I've got in there, including Drachtio srf. It's somewhat of an opinionated scaffolded app. I like to use Pinot, for instance, for logging. There's some other middleware that's brought in because we said we wanted to build a registrar, or that we wanted to handle register messages, which means we're going to act typically as a registrar. So I've got some helper classes already there for that. If we look at the main app.js, pretty straightforward and short. We're including the Drachtio srf framework, and then we're creating an instance of it. I mentioned that I like to use Pinot for logging, so we're creating an instance of a Pinot logger. I've got something called middleware, and I'm bringing in some middleware that we're going to look at in a second. I've got some third-party middleware for parsing registrations, and the registrar itself is actually something I built for my other open source project, Jambone, so we bring that in. Then we come to the basic part where we connect, srf connect. You can see I'm using environment variables for everything. I used to use config files, now I prefer to use environment variables. And then the main handlers are set up. So there's where we're going to handle invite, and you can see we're passing an array of middleware. In this case, only one middleware, init locals. And then we've got the actual handler function. We'll look at that a little bit later, but let's look at the register first. You can see with the register, I've got an array of middleware function, and I've got a bunch of middleware functions going on. And we'll take a look at those. And you can see I'm using the use command. You can see two ways of addressing middleware. You can say srf use and then a list of middleware. Or, as in the case of the invite, I put the array right in the method called srf invite. Let's go look at the middleware. So a middleware function has that signature with a request response next, and we call next to execute the next chain in the middleware. I like to have a middleware function called init locals that I call first. Then I simply create a locals object on the request to contain various things, including a logger. Then I'm going to create a child logger with a SIP call ID so that the SIP call ID is printed in every line of the log file. I like to also put a property on the request object if we get a cancel. If I'm going off to do something and I come back and I want to check to see if the request got canceled in the meantime. And you can see we end by calling next. So in this case, we're always calling the next piece of middleware in the chain. This next piece of middleware is for registrations only, check cache. And you can see what it does is it sees if we already have this AOR, address of record, if this is already a device or a SIP user that's already has an active registration. If it is, and the registration has not expired, then we simply need to send a 200 OK back. We don't need to challenge it again. So this is dealing with a case where you've got a client behind a NAT. He requests an expiration of maybe 3,600 seconds. You don't give it to them. You give them an expiration of 40 seconds and force them to re-register to keep the NAT pinhole open. But in the registrar itself, you've set an expiry of 3,600 seconds. If it falls through, you notice in the case where it's cached, we don't call next. We do call next in every other case, and the next piece of middleware is going to challenge him. It's going to generate a digest challenge. And you can see I've got hard-coded in here something you would replace with your own logic, which was the password function. So there's srf use register and all of that. Now I'm kind of moving fast here, but let's go to the to the register function itself. So we arrive here only if all the middleware has executed. And the nice part of that is when we get to this register function, we know that the user is already authenticated. We're dealing with an authenticated user. So there's really not too much to do. Again, I check if he's behind a NAT and crank the expires value down, and I just add him to the registrar, and I send a 200 OK. That third-party registrar uses Redis, which is a nice product to use for something like registrations, which can expire because you can set an expiry value in Redis and they expire automatically and are removed from the database. If they explicitly unregister, again, I remove them from the database. So that's really a pretty full function registrar that you can use in your application. This is the invite. On the invite, we create a call session object and then call the connect method. I'm saving a few things, including the logger, which you recall in middleware I created earlier. Here I'm not doing much. You'll replace this with your logic. I'm just doing a create B2B UA. Returns me a pair of dialogues, and I'm hard coding an address here that goes along with the test suite. You'll want to change that to do whatever it is your app wants to do. But after you connect successfully, you probably want to do what I'm doing here, which is assign some handlers on both dialogues to listen for the destroy object. When you get a hang up on one dialogue, you want to hang up the other. So when we get a destroy event, then we destroy the other object. We generate a simple little README. And let's look at the test suite. So we're doing this in Docker. So basically we're creating a Docker network with a Drachtio server running in it. Also Redis for the registrar I mentioned uses Redis. And we've got a SIP standing in to act as the UAS that we're sending the call to. So we've got a complete kind of network there. And then our app is just running on the laptop, which is great. It lets us test everything, including calling scenarios, without ever leaving the comfort of our own laptop. And there's the test suite itself where I'm launching some UAC invites towards my application, which again, as we saw, acts as a B2B UA. A couple other things that are in there that I mentioned is linting, so JS lint, you can make sure there's no linting errors. And code coverage as well. Generates the ability to do some code coverage for you. And it will run through the test suite here again. And then we can kind of have a look at code coverage.
And that's it. As always, any questions, ping me at daveh@drachtio.org or join my Slack channel at joinslack.jambones.org. Thanks and have a great day.